Hello and welcome back to your course on assessing your own leadership capability and performance. My name is Lindsay Heeks and I will be your tutor for the duration of this particular course. In this video we'll be looking at the difference between leadership and management. Before we move on though, let's have a quick review of what we've already achieved. Okay, so in video 1 we looked at the content of this particular course and we discussed how you can study this unit formally to achieve an ILM qualification or informally for your own development. However, in this session, which is video 2, we will focus in specific detail on the difference between leadership and management, and this is all with a view of helping you to achieve learning outcome number 1, which was all about understanding leadership styles within an organisation. So what are our objectives for this particular session? Well, there is just one objective for this session, which is for you to be able to describe and explain the difference between leadership and management. So before we get stuck into this particular unit, what I'd like you to do is have a little think yourself. Okay, so those of you that are studying on the accredited route, could you please turn to page 6 within your workbook and complete the activity there. Those of you that are doing non-accredited, what I'd like you to do is take 5 minutes, okay, and have a think about what leaders do and what managers do. Okay, so create your own definition as to what you believe a leader is and what you believe a manager is, and within that I want you to explain what you believe the difference to be. Okay, so pause me for approximately 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes. Okay, and when you've completed your particular tasks, press play again, and then I'll be happy to carry on talking to you. So let's focus on management now. Okay, so within management, one of the first schools, if you like, of thinking was the classical school of thinking, and within the classical school, a definition was made of management being very, very task focused, and a French chap, Henry Fayol, came up with 5 particular functions of management, and those being to plan, so in other words to look ahead, to organise, so that for example means looking at the resources required, to command, so dictating what needs to be done, to control, to inspect and provide feedback on the quality of the work, and to coordinate, so that is coordinating the resources according to what's required to be done. Okay, so what are your thoughts? How does your definition compare to the classical school of thinking? So take a minute, make sure that you have compared against what you've got down against what the classical definition is. So some other thoughts to consider is that aptly considered getting things done through other people. So management is about getting things done through other people. And another definition for you to consider is that managers do things right. So let's look at leadership now. Okay, so one of the leading theorists within leadership and management is a chap called John Kotter, and he defines leadership as what the future should look like. That leadership aligns people with that vision and inspires them to make it happen despite the obstacles. So in other words, leaders set direction, they communicate that direction, they build commitment from their teams to that direction, they motivate and they inspire their people, their workforce for that direction, and they instill the values of the organisation by tapping into people's needs and emotions. So if you look at leadership compared to management, leadership seems 10 times more inspirational, whereas management is incredibly task focused and task orientated. Okay, so one last thing to think about when we're looking at the difference between leadership and management is that leaders do the right thing. So managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing. So again, have a little look at what your own definition was on leadership, and consider whether there's any difference between what we've talked about in relation to leadership to what you've written down, and make any amendments that you see fit. So back over to you now. I'd like you to have a little think about what we've just talked about. Are these differences between leadership and management so black and white? Those of you that are doing the accredited route, can you please turn to page 7 within your workbook and complete the activity there? And those of you that are doing a non-accredited route, take 5 minutes to look at the leaders and managers around you. Ask yourself whether they totally fit into the categories that we've already established, and is there any crossover. So remember what we've said, that managers control, they organise, they coordinate, and they seem to be very task orientated, whereas leaders inspire, they motivate, they innovate, they set the vision, if you like. So is there a crossover? Is it as black and white as our leading theorists would like us to think? Take 5 minutes, pause me, and when you've completed this activity, by all means press play again and we'll carry on talking about this. So now you'll have completed the activity on whether there's a crossover, if you like, between what leadership and management is all about. And you should have done some analysis on the key leaders and managers around you, or people that you've known, to see whether they actually fit into the categories of leadership and management. But here's a little bit more for you to have a think about. So true leadership, is it about people doing things for you even if they don't want to? So is it about you essentially forcing people to do the things that they don't want to do but they still do it? Or is it actually about getting someone to want to do what you want them to do? So that was as defined by President Eisenhower. So one's about using authority, if you like, and the other is about inspiration. So when you've looked at the leaders and managers about you and considered whether there's a crossover between management and leadership, did you consider authority levels, or did you also consider the inspirational factors? So here's a thinking point for you. I'd like you to consider for a couple of minutes what makes a leader a good leader. Are there any terms that you can come up with that you believe are associated with effective leadership? Okay, so some of the terms that you might come up with are things like positive influence, being persuasive, strong characteristics. So this might look like that they're confident, they're conversational, that they have personal qualities that you can relate to. So do they have strong interpersonal skills, high emotional intelligence, and also how are their behaviours, their leadership behaviours, if you like. You know, do they illustrate, do they model their values, do they display integrity, their decision making, is it linked and is it based on the needs of the organisation? So just a bit of a thinking point for you in terms of, you know, considering what you believe makes an effective leader. So back over to you now. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to identify the key responsibility of the leader. Okay, so those of you that are completing the accredited route, can you please turn to page 9 within your workbook and complete the activity there. Those of you that are doing a non-accredited route, can you take 5 minutes and identify a number of key responsibilities of the leadership role. Once you've done that, I'd like you to ensure you've considered what the top 3 most important items are and made a note of why you believe those to be the most important. So pause me. Again, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, and once you've completed this activity, then click play and we'll carry on going through this particular session. So you should now have identified the key responsibilities of the leadership role. So I want you to compare my answers to your answers, and let's see if there's any sort of comparison, any similarities. Okay, so taking responsibility would be one of the key elements of the leadership role. Contributing or even setting the overall vision and goals for the organisation. Communicating the overall vision and goal and doing that effectively. Stimulating innovation and enterprise, so in other words, providing a culture within the organisation where people are allowed to generate new ideas in a safe environment. To support and to develop, so provide again a culture that allows teams and individuals to develop their skill sets, and the culture is supportive of that. The leader should represent the team and should also feedback on their experiences and viewpoints. And last but not least, the leader is essentially the change manager within the organisation. So how does that compare to the list that you wrote? Is there anything that I've talked about that perhaps you haven't included, or is there more that you've included that you believe is absolutely relevant to the leadership role? I think also one of the key attributes of effective leaders is that they can pick themselves up when things perhaps haven't gone so well, which is why I've included this particular quote, because I think it's really relevant. So men's best successes come after their disappointments, and that for me means that when things have hit rock bottom, as long as you persevere and carry on trying, it's highly likely that success will come to you with that effort that you put in. So I especially like this, especially with in relation to leadership. And if you look at the likes of sort of Richard Branson, Alan Sugar and so forth, you can see that they have never always had it easy. They've always worked incredibly hard, and as a result they have achieved what they set out to achieve. So over to you again. There's another activity here that I'd like you to complete, and this activity is about comparing your sort of key attributes, if you like, against the list that you'll have devised in terms of assess, if you like, yourself against that list. So if you're doing the accredited route, can you please turn to page 10 in your workbook and complete the self-analysis there. And if you're doing a non-accredited route, score yourself against your list and against what we've already discussed. Ensure you identify your own strengths and your own areas for improvement. So within your scoring, score yourself in terms of 1 to 10, 1 being very low, 10 being high, and be very sort of honest with yourself, because obviously from this you'll never be able to improve unless you truly understand your current ability. Okay, so you'll now have done the little activity where you've analysed yourself against the key responsibilities of the leadership role. So whether that's from the responsibilities you've established yourself, or if you're doing the accredited route, whether it's from the key responsibilities that are established within your workbook. Okay, but from that you should be able to see your key areas for development. All of us will have areas for development. We can't be brilliant at everything, so please be honest with yourself, and this should help you to focus on specific development needs for yourself. Okay, so to summarise, leadership and management, there's a need for both within any organisational environment. Leadership is about inspiring people to want to follow you as a leader, whereas management is about getting things done. And often management is all about the authority, so they have the authority to get you to do things, whereas leaders will inspire you to want to follow them, so it's nothing to do with their authority levels. Okay, and as I've detailed at the bottom of this particular slide, a leader can be both a leader and a manager. Okay, so if we move on, okay, so there's some additional reading that I'd like you to complete. Okay, so there's an article on Amazon, and there are a couple of questions at the bottom of that particular article that I'd like you to complete, because I think it will actually help summarise what we've talked about in terms of the difference between leadership and management. Okay, and that article is available for those studying on the non-accredited and the accredited route. You'll see that on your platform that you have access to. Okay. I've also included some extra additional reading. So as you see on the slide here, there's a website link to an article that links to management and leadership, and I've also included a QR code that you can scan via your phone, which will take you straight through to that particular article on your device. Okay. So from completing this particular video, you should now be able to describe and explain the difference between leadership and management. Our next session, which is video 3, will focus on the different theories of leadership. And remember, this is all to do with learning outcome number 1. I look forward to seeing you in the next session, and until then, I shall leave you to it.